everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are talking about the worst books of 2021. So this list, thankfully, is much shorter than my best books list, and we will go through it and talk about my worst books of the year. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the DNFs I had this year. One thing I did want to say, because it seems that we have controversy going around about these kind of videos on Twitter every single December and January. These videos are not for the authors. I am not going to be tagging any of the authors in any video like this. I will never try and go to their page and tell them that their book sucks. These are purely based on my opinions and my views, and these types of videos are for readers. It's like a review video. That's what this is. We always have stuff. What are you doing?
Mommy.
Hi.
Mommy.
I'm coming to sit. We always have people talking about how we shouldn't make videos like this. It's horrible to be negative, and authors deserve so much more love around this time of year. And I do agree, authors deserve love. It is hard to do that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to be putting a reader type video, a review type video in an author's space, so authors should also not be coming into our spaces and saying we can't do this. It's a staple here on BookTube, so that's what we're gonna do. Like I said before, I have a lot fewer books for this video than I did in my best books video. In my best books video, I actually had over 20 books in that one. Today, I only have 5 worst books of the year, plus, like I said, some DNFs. I think we're gonna do the worst books first, because that's probably what you guys are here for. And so let's go into it. We are gonna start with my least worst book and work my way up to the one I disliked the most. So at number 5, I have Style by Chelsea M. Cameron. I read this book as part of my vlog series that I did in 2021, where I was reading books by authors with names that I share with them, so obviously this one was Chelsea. And this ultimately, I think I gave a 2.5 stars, which really shows you that I didn't have a ton of books that I hated this year. This is a self-published YA sapphic romance that I was just really hoping was going to be better, but the writing style and stuff I really didn't jive with. It was something that was definitely more telling than showing, as in like, I went to school, I went to class, I went to work, I went home. There wasn't enough detail and interaction with different characters. We also were following 2 different girls, and there were multiple times where I confused whose point of view we were in because they were very, very similar. And then because this is a YA romance, I was hoping for more romance. We had a lot of good coming out moments, although some of it got a little bit repetitive, and the girls were very more lusting after each other than romancy feelings, and so I was hoping for more romance. And then just so you guys know, because it was something that I was not prepared for, we did have masturbation scenes starting at like page 13, and because these are both, I think, supposed to be seniors in high school, I'm pretty sure, I don't think they were fully 18, but even then it felt a little bit gratuitous to me personally. It was just something that I did not expect and did not necessarily think was needed. Moving on to number 4, I have What Big Teeth by Rose Sabo. This was a book that was another one that I was hoping for more. I did do this for another sort of reading vlog. I think it was like a NetGalley reading vlog, and I wanted to DNF it, but I didn't because I was doing it for a reading vlog. I need to be a little bit better about actually just DNFing things that I know I'm not getting into. But it was supposed to be like an Addams Family, monsters type of story because we have a family full of monsters, but also a mystery because our main character had been like shipped off to boarding school, and then after some sort of incident comes back home to her family, but she doesn't remember why she was shipped off to boarding school in the first place, and I didn't really understand where we were going with this story. I think that's part of the reason I didn't DNF it, is because it was a mystery. I was trying to figure out what was going on. I wanted to know. But the further we got into the story, the less I knew what was going on, the more questions I had. We didn't fully get to understand her or her family or what kind of monsters they actually were. And then there was some elements that I did not enjoy. One big one that I remember was the fact that there was elements of like an age gap romance type of thing. It wasn't necessarily romance, but there were a few teenagers in this family who were very much going after a very, very much older character, like much older, and people were just sort of encouraging it. Like, it wasn't frowned upon, even though there was such a huge age gap. And in this story, it sounds like this is a very common thing in their family, and so it was just something that, I don't know, creeped me out a little bit. And it wasn't ever shown that it was frowned upon. And then the last thing that really just sort of pushed it over into the I did not enjoy this book part is the fact that none of the characters were redeemable. And I mean that in the fact that, like, we start off the story not really knowing much about the characters, but the further we get in, every single character seems to have nothing good about them. And so because of the fact that we didn't even have a single character that I wanted to root for at all, I didn't really care by the end of the story. Number 3, we had City of Villains by Estelle Lore. This was supposed to be a Disney Villains meets Gotham City type of book. And this is another one that I felt was very much telling and not showing, especially since we got thrown into the story in what felt like the middle of the story. Our main character, Mary Elizabeth, has friends and a boyfriend and relationships, but we never get to see them progress at all. We're just sort of told, like, this is her best friend, this is her boyfriend, and then we don't really get to see those characters very much after that. Like, we don't get to see the interaction. We do have this based on Disney villains, and I think that's part of the reason I was a little bit harsher with this, because we were supposed to be able to see some parallels for the Disney villains, and a lot of the time I did not see it. We had some characters that were named after Disney villains, and you knew that's exactly who we were going for, like Ursula, so obviously they were Ursula, but then we also had some characters that weren't based on Disney villains, which had different names, and that was fine. We had like this juxtaposition of like the two different societies, the ones that were from magic and the ones that weren't from magic, but we also then had characters like Mary Elizabeth, who did not have Disney villain names or anything that was even closely discernible to that, but at the same time, I believe she was supposed to be the Queen of Hearts. So this is just one of those ones that definitely fell more flat than anything else. Like, it didn't live up to my expectations. At number 2, I have House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. So now, out of this list of 5, technically I gave this one the highest rating. I think I gave it a 3-star. I gave it an extra star because of the fact that, like, you can tell from reading this story how much work and creativeness and like planning had to go into it from the author, because this is the book that everybody's like, oh my gosh, the format of it gets crazy. You go in and everything is like mixed up and the words are on different pages and like things you have to like spin the book around. Like, it's very, very intricate. However, it is such a long ass book. It took forever to read, and half of this book is a like haunted house type of story thing, and most of that I did enjoy. Some of it took forever to get there because we also have a part that's like a textbook, and the parts that are like a textbook read like a textbook. There was so much like technical jargon that I did not think actually pertained to the story. It was just hurting my head trying to read those parts. Like, if I was able to actually be like, read from here to here and this is the actual like haunted house thing, if like I didn't have to read anything else, I think I would have enjoyed it much, much more. And then the other part, so I guess it's like a third, a third, a third instead of a half and a half and something else. We have footnotes. So again, like I said, I gave it an extra star because of how well everything had to be put together. But basically we have footnotes of a guy who had found the like transcript of the book, which is like the textbook stuff, and that sort of book is being written about the haunted house type of thing, that the middle guy who was writing the original like textbooky type of stuff was watching a like found footage home movie type of thing about the house. So there's like 3 layers to it. Well, those footnotes, the guy in those footnotes, I don't understand exactly how he fits into the haunted house story. Some people are like, oh no, it fits in perfectly, you know exactly what's going on. I didn't, but also he was the worst character. A lot of the stuff that was in there sounded like somebody on an acid trip. Like, it was just so weird and not creepy enough for me. Like, I was wishing for more horror elements, but there were also some parts that were, I guess, should have been horror, but like there was one part that I really wanted to like sort of DNF after that part, where there is animal death, and not just animal death, but like very much gruesome detail animal death. And again, I don't see how that fit into the rest of the narrative at all. Also, this guy mostly just talks about sex and drugs. And when I say that, I mean very much so, like most of the time. So again, I just, like, if I could break the book up into certain different parts, one part, that haunted house, weird dimensional stuff, that was really, really good and very sort of creepy. I wish there was a little bit more to it because I liked that part a lot. But then the textbook stuff and the weird extra guy and the footnote stuff, I did not get at all. And so I did not like those at all. And then number one, my worst book of 2021 is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. So this book is way too long. It is a chunky ass book. How many pages is it? Like over 900, over 800 pages, something like that. And don't get me wrong, I've read some of Christopher Paolini's YA fantasy stuff, and back when those were like first being published, I really, really enjoyed them. I feel like the main thing for this book is it needed an editor, somebody to actually sit him down and be like, you need to edit the fuck out of this book, because it was too much. We had multiple parts where it was like, here's the part where we have one character, she goes and gets trapped, she has to escape, she goes into like cryo sleep, and then the next part, she wakes up, she gets trapped, she has to escape, she goes into cryo sleep. The next part, she wakes up. Like, it's like the exact same thing over and over, it felt like. We did have some other cast of characters in here, but none of the characters was I connected to. Like, there were parts where people were getting injured and dying, and I did not give a shit. I did not care. We also had a lot of, like, alien type of stuff, alien war, alien politics, but I didn't feel like we got enough of it. Also, all of the aliens were like based on sea creatures, and I don't know why. There was no explanation for why these ones looked like squids and these ones looked like crabs. Like, we did not, like, why was that there? Who knows? I will say that one part I should have liked is the fact that he was trying to give us a lot of science in our science fiction, but it also felt like some people knew too much. Like, our main character is supposed to be a specific sort of scientist. I don't remember what kind because I read this forever ago and I just don't remember, geologist or something like that. But she knew more about spaceships than I really feel like she would have if she was the geologist on her crew. She knew a lot of stuff and she would go in and explain everything to us. Anything she did not know science-wise, other people would explain to her step by step by step, so that there was a lot of science in there. I do feel like he did a lot of research for it, but I don't need to know that much. Like, I don't need my character to be super, super smart and know the intricate workings of light speed travel. Like, I don't need to know that. But again, my biggest issue was how long this book was, how repetitive it was, and the fact that we didn't feel like we had enough character development when a lot of the plot was sort of slow and repetitive. Like, if we had really good characters in it and they were pushing the story forward, I feel like I would have liked it better. This book really needed an editor. Okay, so those are the worst books of 2021. Now, I have 9 DNFs that I wanted to talk about a little bit briefly. Most of these DNFs, I DNF'd because they were books that were not for me, not because they were necessarily horrible. And I did find it interesting that out of all of the books I read, I think I read 250 books in the year of 2021. I had 9 DNFs, which accounts for only 3.6% of all the books that I read. So because these are also not like based on enjoyment necessarily, they're just books that I DNF'd, I have these in order by author's last name. So the first one I have here is Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. I don't remember how far I got into like any of these books, but I do know I DNF'd this one because it was a YA sci-fi. Sci-fi is one of my favorite genres, so I do feel like I'm a little bit harsher on it than some other stuff. But this is one that, again, I just felt like we didn't get enough character information. It felt like we were thrown into the story in the middle of the story because our character has relationships and friendships, and we don't ever get like an explanation for like her inside jokes or anything. We're just like, oh yeah, she went with her best friend to go do this, and they have this history with somebody else, but like we don't actually know what it is. Also, our main character is supposed to be a like clone of a queen or a princess or a commander, something like that, high up in this like alien army. And so once we eventually do get into the space aspects, she has a lot of just knowledge that just pops up into her head about the other people on board, and it's knowledge sort of like, oh, this kind of alien is this kind of species, they live on this kind of planet, and this is how like their mating patterns work. Like, it was stuff that we didn't really need to know. We didn't get to know any of the other alien characters as people. We just got to know the knowledge out of their head of like what kind of alien species they were. And I did appreciate the author trying to include a lot of alien species, but when we get knowledge for every single one out of the character's head like that, like every single one, it was too much. Some of the books felt like a little bit of a parody of sci-fi. I know it wasn't supposed to be, but for me it just felt like there was a little bit too much in there. They were trying too hard with this story. The next one I have here is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. This one was 100% a me problem with the way that the dialogue was written. Part of this is probably because I had an e-arc compared to the finished version, but a lot of stuff was written in like, not phonetically, but it was written in broken English by certain characters that usually would speak a different language. Some of it also was written phonetically for the Asian language that was being spoken. I can't exactly remember because I think there was like 2 or 3 different Asian languages that they could technically speak. But so a lot of it was me trying to decipher what exactly was going on page with the dialogue. Maybe I should have tried to read it with an audiobook, but by the time I got to the point where I wanted to DNF, I just didn't want to try again. It might be something I want to try in the future because the story sounded interesting. The fact that we had a girl being able to speak to like spirits, and there's the Blackwater Sister, which I think is some sort of like goddess or something. Like, it sounded like it could be interesting, but I was having a very hard time actually reading the dialogue when it wasn't strictly in English. And I've had this issue before, like Huckleberry Finn in high school, anything like that where we have some words where they're spelled out phonetically. My brain just sometimes doesn't want to read it correctly, and it takes me like twice as long to read. The next one I have here is Rhea and the Blood of the Nectar by Payal Doshi. This is a middle grade fantasy that I was really wanting to get into because we started off pretty strong with the fact that Rhea lives in India. We were getting a lot of Indian culture and the way that her mother works and her grandmother works and the family dynamics. I did have some issues with the family dynamics in the fact that I know some people probably have to deal with this, but it was hitting me over the head with it in this book where the parents favor her brother more than her. Her brother could do no wrong, and she was always getting in trouble for things that didn't seem to be things that needed to matter, except for she was a girl and he was a boy. And it was something, again, like I said, that was hitting me over the head with that at the beginning of the book, and I was getting really, really annoyed for our main character's sake. But then her brother ends up getting whisked away to like a magical world, and her parents just won't talk about it, like he no longer exists type of thing, but she wants to go and get him back. And once we get to the magical world, everything really, really slowed down. We didn't really have explanations for the magic, and by that time I was just sort of because we didn't have enough characters for me to really want to continue reading it. Again, I really liked the beginning of the story. It might have gotten better, but it got to the point where I was just bored and didn't fully like have any investment in her going to get her brother back after the way her family was treating her too. Like, it was just sort of like, Then I have Love in an Undead Age by A.M. Jeever. This, I believe, is a new adult or adult romance set during the zombie apocalypse. I was very excited to read this one. However, part of the reason I ended up DNFing it is it was set at Santa Clarita College or University, which is a Jesuit university, so that's a branch of Christianity, and it came into the story at multiple parts. The Jesuits were basically in charge of this community where our main character lives, and there were like priests or fathers like in charge of stuff, and so it was going into like every aspect of the story, and it was just something I didn't expect. And then I had heard that there was going to be a love triangle, which is not necessarily a bad thing for me. However, one of the branches of the love triangle is a married man. and his wife was not the other branch of the love triangle. So it was one of those things where we got the Jesuit stuff in there that I just wasn't expecting, and then I do not condone any sort of cheating. Like, that is one of my hard passes for romance stuff especially, so I just knew this was not the book for me. Then I have The Weird of Hali Innsmouth by John Michael Greer. This one I tried to read in a vlog, so I will leave it linked down below. Another one of my What's in a Name vlogs. This again is just not for me. It was something that was supposed to be like Lovecraftian type of stuff, and even though I have never read Lovecraft, I was hoping to be able to jump into it because it sounded sort of interesting, but you do need to know Lovecraft stuff in order to go into this, because when they're talking about certain elements of Lovecraft's stories and mythology, that kind of stuff, sometimes they don't explain it. They're just like, oh, it's this character, and I'm like, who? Because I never read it. So this is definitely just one of those things where you need to know quite a bit of Lovecraftian stuff and mythology in order to read this. I was lost, and so I knew I couldn't read it. The next one I have here is A Study in Honor by Claire Odell. This is supposed to be a futuristic Sherlock Holmes retelling type of thing, and I had some definite issues with this story. First of all, both Sherlock Holmes and Watson are female, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I didn't really see much of the characterizations of the original Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson in the characters. It was definitely twisted more than I would have liked if it was supposed to be a retelling. Sherlock was very manipulative and abusive in a way that I did not enjoy. This was supposed to be eventually, I believe, a sapphic romance between them, but because of how they treat each other, I did not want to read that. But the main reason I ended up DNFing this book is it is written by a white woman who is writing about black characters living in, I believe, a futuristic Washington, D.C., but a lot of the commentary that the author was going into in the characters' heads was about specifically being black and living in DC. And so I did not feel like she had the authority to actually be talking about these issues from a black character's perspective. It just made me not feel comfortable reading it, because I would rather, if I was going to be reading about something that is very much tied into their race and identity, I would like to read it from the perspective of an author who has also been through that and knows what they're talking about. Then I have Nine of Swords by Brooklyn Quintana. This is actually a physical arc that I was sent, and I did start reading this back when I got it. I still have a bookmark in here. It doesn't look like I've read much. I've read over 100 pages of this. It is a very, very chunky boy book, and this is one of those ones where I wasn't necessarily disliking what I was reading, but I got to a point where I just needed to put this down, and I haven't picked it back up yet. This is supposed to be a YA fantasy about a boy going to like a military boarding school, and it's magical. Like, it talks about, I think, mermaids in the lake, a jungle where trees rearrange themselves, stuff like that. Things that sounded very, very interesting. My biggest issue with this, again, it's not necessarily an issue, but I didn't read far enough to understand how this is going to go. We start off this book at like the boy being 11, I want to say, maybe 12, so under the age for young adults. And because we're starting it off so young, I didn't expect that. I was expecting to start off, you know, at the military academy, or going to the military academy, or because it's billed as young adult, with an older protagonist. Something in like even 13, 14, 15 range at the youngest. But also, I read 100 pages and we're nowhere near going to this boarding school. We had some political family drama stuff, which is not necessarily my thing. So basically this is something that I do want to try again eventually, but I'm unsure how it actually fits into age categories and genres, because this is self-published or indie published, so you can obviously break through those categories and genres, but at the same time, I went in expecting YA because that's what it was billed as, and the writing style feels a little bit more older YA/adult, but the characters in this are very, very young, so I was expecting a little bit more middle grade. So the writing style and age groupings of characters doesn't quite fit this currently, and so I'm very just sort of confused about where this is going to go. Obviously, I haven't read nearly enough for this thick, chunky book. Like, it's 700 something pages, but like I said, I have gotten over 100 pages in, so I definitely gave it a good try. The next one I have here is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This is 100% a sort of like content warning, trigger warning DNF. I don't personally have any triggers, but it did end up having content that I just could not get past. This book I knew in general had a ton of content and trigger warnings because while it is a romance, it is a very dark romance. We're following a guy and a girl where the girl is in a previous relationship, like she's already in a relationship, but it is an abusive relationship, and I believe eventually she gets out of it and then has a romance with the main guy. I don't remember how much I read of it, but everything that I read so far, she was still in the previous relationship, and she ends up having a surprise pregnancy in the previous relationship and a baby with the abusive boyfriend. My issue that I could not get past is that, yes, there is abuse in this relationship. I knew that going in. However, the boyfriend, the abuser, uses her daughter against her, as in like, you need to do this or I'm going to take the baby away, or I'm going to do this to the baby. And so like that I just could not get past. He's not a nice person, he's an abuser, but I could not get past the idea of using her child against her. And so yeah. And then the last one I have here is Big Bad Wolf by Sulika Snyder. This is another one where it's me. I'm sure some people are going to love this book, but this is a paranormal romance where from like really early on in the book, the main guy character is lusting after the main female character. There is no romance to be seen whatsoever, but he is constantly talking about her body and like how it affects his body and what he wants to do to her. Like all he thinks about is sex, and it starts off within like the first chapter. Like it is so gosh darn early, and that is all I got from the book. That's not the kind of romance I like. I need more build up and actual romance in it. So again, I DNF'd it. It's not necessarily a bad book. I know some people are going to love this, but I did not like the setup for it, so that's me. Okay, and so that is everything. All of my worst books of the year plus the ones that I did DNF. And if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Let me know if any of these books on my list were your favorite, or if it was something that you also just did not like, because I'm curious. I love to hear what you guys think. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I do have videos up Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I will see you then. Bye!